Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Everything Matters podcast. My name is Bradford Speaks, and I'm the host. We've got a great show lined up for you today with a great friend of mine, David Pipkin. David serves as the vice chair of the Constitution Party of Texas. He's a real freedom fighter out to fight for truth, freedom, liberty, and prosperity for all Americans. We've had some really meaningful and powerful conversations together over the years. And one of the things I appreciate about David is that the fact that no matter how we may agree or disagree or agree to disagree, we always come out with a mutual amount of respect for each other. And one of the things that I regret that we didn't get recorded, well, not regret per se, but that I wish we had got recorded was the breakdown that we had prior to the show being aired. He had posted something on LinkedIn and I commented about it with a comment that David felt was derailing the point of the conversation, the point of his post. So went to the inbox and we talked about it, we chatted, it turned into like a 35, 40-minute conversation over chat, and it just wasn't really going anywhere. Both were trying to prove our own points. So I said, David, why not just give you a call, brother? Maybe this would be better handled over the phone. So I picked the phone up and I called him, and we continued to go back and forth. And we were continually missing each other's point. We weren't really hearing each other. So we slowed down. We both said, hey, brother, why don't you just tell me, let me just stop talking and thinking about making my point. Let me just listen to you and hear you. He slowed down and he finally heard what I was trying to say at the point that I was making. And I slowed down for a moment and I finally got what he was sharing. And that made all the difference in the conversation. And I just feel like that's something that's missing. It turns out that it was one of the best conversations that we ever had because we actually came out with something that was productive, that was meaningful, getting each other's point of view and being able to go on and make the difference in the world that we both want to make in our own way. So please help me welcome our amazing guest today, Mr. David Pipkin, great friend of mine. Enjoy the show. Let's get it popping. David Pipkin, what's going on, good brother? How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Bradford. It's great to be with you.
Oh, man, it's so great to have you on the show. We've been talking about this for a few months now, right? And we're finally here, bro.
Yes, sir. It's looking amazing, Bradford. Kudos.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. And I thank you for being on the show, coming on to talk about some of the things that you're up to. And I know you're doing some really important work over there in the state of Texas and looking to really impact even on a broader scale, right? Nationally and perhaps even globally. So, a lot of stuff that I know you want to share, want to talk about with the audience today, man. I'm so excited that we've been able to create a platform to have these kinds of conversations. You and I over the years have had some really great conversations, very rich conversations around some sensitive topics or what most people might consider to be very sensitive topics. But we've always been able to keep a certain camaraderie, a certain respect for each other's point of view, which is what has kept our friendship and our brotherhood really alive over the years. So I thank you for that, man.
I thank you as well. It's very rare. These days we so many have adopted this social media mindset, and they think because they're behind a keyboard, there's no need for any filter anymore. And that's one thing I quickly grew to respect about you was, we've even disagreed at times, and never has it ever gone off the rails or become anything personal or any talking points introduced. And so I've always appreciated that about you. You're a very genuine person.
I appreciate it, man. And I think that's what makes that is one of the reasons I started this podcast, right? Is to have a place where people can have safe conversations and really share and respect. And we can demonstrate here that it's possible to respect someone's point of view because we've all got one. And we can still all get along and create a world that works for all of us. And that's what this is about, man. So thank you.
Yes, sir. It's very natural. We're just doing on the podcast what we've been doing for 4 or 5 years now, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a beautiful thing, man. I love it. Well, hey, David, I want to start the conversation out, man, by talking about something that I know is really close and dear and then really important to you. And it's the work that you're doing with the Constitution Party of Texas, right? And one of your main goals is really driving civil discourse rooted in self-evident truth and the pursuit of greater truth, political and otherwise. And, we talk about having a political conversation But you and I know that our political system here in the United States, and I would even argue across the world, is completely broken and dysfunctional, right, in a large
Yes.
degree. So what are you doing with regards to the Constitutional Party of Texas? And what are you guys out to cause in the work that you're up to?
Boy, that's a great question to unpack. So it really starts with, because that cause, what you just stated is really sort of where we are in the process of that conversation right now, because of this broken political system that we have. And, to peel that onion back a little further, the challenge is that we have so many people who vote in the United States of America who are convinced that you can only choose, the D or the R within what I call the corrupt duopoly. And so that's why where we are as a party is just simply trying to have the conversation, because the way the Democrats and Republicans have the electoral system set up right now is parties like Constitution Party Texas don't even get ballot access. They've got the rules so constrained that we've got to get twice the signatures in half the time and pay twice the money as these so-called establishment political parties that are already entrenched in the system. And it's like you and I have talked about many times, and I've said to you before, while I would concede that it's probably likely that Democrats and Republicans have a genuine hatred for one another, what they hate more is the idea of someone who is a true constitutional person who really understands how we were founded as a nation. They would hate to see someone like yourself or myself break up their control over that system. So where it is, we're very small at this point. We've been a party really since the mid '90s, but that's really the cause right now. Is the chairman of Constitution Party Texas is Mr. Scott Copeland, and I was recently asked to serve in the role of vice chair of the Constitution Party Texas. We've had conversations with candidates, generally who are running, on the Republican side, and one of the first things we hear out of those candidates is, well, you should vote for me and you should support me because I'm a true constitutional conservative. And what we see over and over and over again is they're not. It's become a selling point for the GOP to pander to this group called conservatives. And I guess to put a bow on this answer is we've got to get out of this false binary mindset of left versus right, conservative versus liberal, or whatever. We were not a country founded on ideology. We were a country founded on self-evident truths. Among these truths, we're all created equal and endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights, meaning rights that government cannot grant, nor can government take away. Neither side of that corrupt duopoly is giving us a constitutional republic, yet they continue to vote the same way. But I'd say that's our big mission in the party, kind of two-pronged. We want to fight for ballot access. We welcome support from anyone in any party that will help us to do that. But we want to see true freedom. If Bradford decides he wants to run for office and he wants to run as a Constitution Party Texas candidate, you should have the freedom to be able to do that, and people should have the freedom to be able to vote for you. I don't know what they're scared of.
And it shouldn't cost me $20 million to do that.
You just nailed it right on the head. It's always about the money, isn't it, Bradford?
It's always about the money, man. It's always about the money. Follow the money, man. I always say follow the money. You'll find anything you want to find in terms of corruption, right? That's awesome, David, man. And I can certainly get around and get on board with anything that's following the Constitution, because I think it's a very powerful document that gives us everything we need to have a free country and to be free as human beings. However, I wanted to bring one question to you, and I know that you and I have talked about this before in the past, and it can be a sensitive topic for people, but there are a lot of Black Americans who feel like the Constitution wasn't really written for them. I mean, for all intents and purposes, right? Their ancestors were in slavery at the time that the document was even penned. So what would you have to say to Black Americans? Because as you know, this creates a friction between Black and white Americans. What would you say about that for people who feel like, man, that document's not for us, man, that's for white people?
Right. And that's a question that I have handled so many times, and I'd have to say the success rate is nowhere close to where I would like to see it. Because what I've seen is just like this false allegiance that people have to ideology, I'm seeing a false allegiance to race. And the fact of the matter is that if you go back to American history and you look at the conversations that were happening at the time, and especially in that interim period between 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was signed, versus when the Constitution was born in 1787, it had to be ratified by all these states, and so there were huge arguments taking place, and one of the issues at the heart of those arguments was slavery, and so that unpacks a whole bunch of history there, because for example, one of the common myths that was born out of that document was this idea that black people represented only 3/5 of a person. That is not what the whole compromise was about. But the reality was that it was the abolitionists who were sitting at the table. So that's one point, is to remember, even at our founding, there were white people who were all about abolishing slavery. They were all about recognizing that black people were human beings just as white people were. The people who've written history haven't told us the exact truth, as you and I know. In many cases. At the heart of all this, Bradford, and I think this is something else you and I have talked about, is if people aren't thirsting for the truth, if people are only making up their minds to dig in their heels on their position and to fight for that position no matter what, and that's what we're seeing with organizations like Black Lives Matter, they're not advancing truth. They're advancing an agenda, and very often they're advancing that agenda at the expense of truth. But if you would look at the person and character and historical figure, the man, the great American who was Frederick Douglass, all of those narratives come unraveled, because that was a black man who was actually recruited by the people who were advocating, abolitionists and civil rights. They wanted him to push that very narrative that you just posed in that question. And as he read the founding documents, namely the Declaration and the Constitution, as well as the Articles or the Federalist Papers, I was blanking on that. Sorry about that. The Federalist Papers, it became abundantly clear to him that his enemy was not in those founding documents, that the key to freedom was in those self-evident truths that were spelled out in those founding documents. And you advanced more closer to modern day, and you got Martin Luther King, who again cited the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, and I love the way he emphasized all in that great speech.
All men.
All men, right? And of course that extends to women. I mean, here's the thing, Bradford, I'll wrap it up with this point. What we're committing in this country is a far greater sin than slavery, in my opinion, and that's abortion. And there is no race under attack on the face of this planet like black people in America through abortion. And so if people would really take the time to pause on their narrative, to seek first to understand and listen, right? You'll see that the keys to the freedom and the things that even I, as a white man, shocking, are fighting for, right? Are going to make people like you and black people who claim they're not free, if they'll just look in the heart of what was there and what our founders gave us. It was truly a miracle. When you look at what the conditions of the world at that time and the keys to freedom that they gave us, it's truly a divine miracle. And I think that we would find that there would be a heck of a lot of common ground that we could all move forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I have this conversation with many people in addition to having it with you as well. I always tell people, walk outside your front door. Go to the grocery store. Go to the bank. How about the post office? And just talk to somebody.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what color they are. My neighbor to the right is white. My neighbor to the left is white. Across the street's Indian. And the cat corner, they're Asian. We all get together and drink beers and hang out.
Yes. And
I go by my personal experience. And I can't say that, now growing up in Louisiana, there were some things that were there, but I still have lots of friends that are white. I have friends of all races because I make myself available and I'm willing to let go of my point of view and give people the opportunity to show me who they are.
Yes. Yeah. That erects, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that brought to mind one of the, one of those false barriers that gets erected at one point I was involved in a show, live stream show that was the point, was to, literally the motto was saving America one civil conversation at a time. And I've actually had black guests on that show where we were there. The purpose of that show was for us to model civil discourse. And one of the things they said to me, two things I found incredibly offensive, and I looked at them and said, if I were a black man, I mean, I'm offended anyway, but if I were a black man, I'd be especially offended at what you said, because I would name people like Clarence Thomas or Frederick Douglass or Brandon Tatum, Thomas Sowell, and you throw up these people who are black who challenge their ideology, and they would say, well, we revoked his black card. So basically what they're saying is, right, if you don't adhere to this certain narrative, you lose the right to be black. Now, I can't think of, imagine me saying that. Well, I mean, Joe Biden got away with it, right? Joe Biden told him, if you don't vote for me, you aren't black.
Yeah.
But the other point of that is when people, and this is another thing about you and I have never crossed this bridge where I've said to you, because of my skin color, you can't understand me, or because of your skin color, I can't understand you. Never.
Right.
Because what's the key to understanding, except that we first make the decision in our own minds that we're making it our mission to understand. And you and I have done that, and that's why we have these productive conversations.
Absolutely. And you were alluding to something earlier about this narrative being used as a scapegoat in a lot of senses, right? It's a way to keep people divided. And if you look back through history, to be honest with you, it's the way that governments have always stayed in power, is by dividing the common people. Yes. It is the oldest trick in the book. And we fall for it, hook, line, and sinker every single time. Again, go and look at your personal experiences with the people in your life, and you'll see that what you think is there may not be there. And like you said, you got to be willing to give up your point of view and listen to the other person's point of view. Everybody's got an experience that they've had, right?
That's right.
Everybody's experience is valid. But we can actually complete that experience, and we can go and create a new context and move forward in a new and powerful way. And that's what this conversation is about.
You have this amazing talent for making statements and asking questions that spark really key, important principles. But so kudos again. But that's another thing is when you create more and more classes of victims, you can sow such disruption, because when people when you look at the most heinous crimes that people commit, many times those people are coming from a victim mentality. And there's one universal truth that we all live under, is that hurt people hurt people.
Hurt people. Absolutely.
And so when you can create this victim class, whatever it is, whether it's Black America, white America, who was enslaved, who wasn't, who's being attacked by this group or that group, rich, poor, black, white, all these false binary options. And this is where I go to, you have to come to a decision. What is your worldview? And it really comes down to one of two things. As you know, I'm a Christian. I believe that Jesus died on the cross for every single one of us, whether they believe that or not. That's the gift that he gave us. And I don't know anywhere in the Bible where Jesus tells us that we need to look back on our grievances and seek to live for revenge. That's not what we're told to do. We're told to do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with God, and to keep our eyes on the prize. And how do you do that? But by loving my brothers, by loving my sisters, right? Martin Luther King said it best. Judge a person by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin.
That's right. Couldn't have said it better, man. Some of the most infamous words ever spoken out of a human being's mouth, right? All right, David, man, really great conversation, brother. I appreciate that. So I want to change gears real quick, right? Because as you know, the Everything Matters podcast is about having people get empowered behind, what it is they're up to and what matters most to them in life. So I want to talk about, and part of that is moving beyond failure and breakdowns, right? So I want to ask you, what's been one of the biggest challenges that you faced in either your personal life, your career, job, whatever it might be? And how did you find a way to get past that or to overcome that, in a sense?
Yeah, that's I'm going to throw a bone out there for you for anyone who you've invited to be a guest on this show. I would strongly encourage you, when Bradford sends you that questionnaire, do that with significant people in your life. For me, my son-in-law happened to be in town visiting, and my wife was here, and we were out on the back patio, and actually went through those answers together, and we all took turns answering them. It sparked an amazing conversation. So thank you for that blessing, as well as the blessing of being here. But it is ongoing, because there are people that I've run across, even in recent days, not to mention recent years, that if I tried to tell them that I've overcome my ability to communicate in a way that puts others first, and that I demonstrate what it is to seek to understand, they would laugh their heads off, because it's an ongoing challenge. It's not something that I think can be conquered in this life. I would say there's people who do it in an exemplary fashion. One of the people that I greatly admire these days is Dr. Jordan Peterson. And if you guys haven't seen his interview with Dr. Oz, incredibly powerful. I'd even recommend that you watch the full 6-hour version, because it's an incredible. I mean, Dr. Oz does a great job at interviewing as well, that allows Jordan Peterson to really answer without being on the defensive, like as happens in so many other interviews. But anyway, he just does a great job at being bold and direct, and even challenging and confronting narratives, without going into that area where he demeans the other person. Like he does an excellent job, in my mind, of confronting falsehoods, or at least what he sees as falsehoods, without it turning to a personal attack. And I think that's one thing that I realized, that I was revealing weakness in myself when I did that. There's kind of a challenging perspective there. Sometimes people approach you, and I still believe this. I believe that sometimes people teach you what they need from you in order for them to be reached. Right. So if someone comes at you with a flamethrower, sometimes you got to take out the flamethrower.
Right, for sure.
But there's people who disagree with me on that. But I think sometimes that's the way it looks. You've got to meet someone on the battlefield that they present for you to meet them on, because that's what they're basically telling you. The only way you're going to reach me is to kick my rear end.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Here comes the rear end kicking. Right.
Right.
So, but by and large, where I was revealing myself to be weak was if I was confronted with someone who had more knowledge than I did, and maybe they're coming at me a little bit snarky or a little bit challenging, but they're largely just making a point. And then I engage in personal jabs or personal insults. Right. And all I'm saying is, I don't have a better argument than you, and I'm too weak I lack the integrity to admit that. Right. And so that was a pivotal point for me. And I think you're very familiar with some of my sales career, and some of that training that I received from you through that company was certainly instrumental in that. And I think that's helped a lot too. But where it really impacted me the most was in my deepest, most meaningful relationships, where overcoming estrangement with my mother, and sometimes causing estrangement between my wife or my daughter, and it's ongoing. There are still times that I fail in glorious fashion, but it's that I think where I'm successful is that willingness to confront that and be held accountable, because like I said, it's not something I've conquered, but it's something I'm in the process of conquering. And I think it has led to richer, more meaningful relationships. I don't think you and I would be here on this show right now if I hadn't sought to grow to where I could do this.
Absolutely, 100%. As you talk about that, it makes me think about number one, I did this personal training and development program last year. It's about a 7-month program. It really changed my life in a significant way. You and I have talked about it briefly.
Yes, sir.
And one of the things that I learned in that program was getting past my idea or my narrative around failure. Like, what I made failure mean for me was what had me stay in a failed state. This podcast is a product of that work. Like, I've wanted to have a podcast for years, man. Years. And I never did it because I was afraid of failing. I was like, what if I don't get it right? And at this point, I'm like, what? So what if I don't get it right? So what? I'll keep learning. I'll keep trying. And when I was a kid, another thing I thought about as you were talking, when I was a kid, there was a lady across the street from me, Miss Eva Moses, God, rest her soul. When I was learning how to ride a bicycle, she would always say to me every time I fall and I scrape up my leg and I get up and I start crying, and she's like, Brad, get up, get back on that bike, try it again, baby. You can do it. I wipe my face, the tears run in my eyes, and, brush off the dust off and the rocks off my legs, and I get back on the bike and I try it again, and I fall again, and I can hear her screaming out that scream. Get it back up, Brad. You can do it, baby. Get back up. Try it again. And I've taken that with me my entire life. And inside of that, I still didn't have a healthy relationship with failure because I always was worried about what someone else was going to say about it.
Yeah.
I had a breakthrough in that last year, and I'm done with it. So, I appreciate you sharing what you did about that. And it is an ongoing thing, right? You're continuing to discover about yourself, continue to discover what blockages you have and why they're there. How did that get there? I didn't even know that was there, right? And once you can identify it and isolate it, now you can actually move through it. So powerful, man. So powerful.
Yeah, and I hope you're planning on sharing more about the breakthrough you had, because this is what we need. There was I'm probably going to mess this up, but there's an adage that says something to the effect of, when you're speaking, speak as though you are nothing but right. And when you're listening, listen as though you can't possibly be anything but wrong. Right?
Love that.
And
Love that.
And so,
100%.
that's I think that sparks so much. I'd love to hear more about your breakthrough, about how you got to the point where you're like, hey, I can do this, because I can tell you, I knew you, during that time that you must have been turning that over in your mind. And
man.
You're an amazing speaker. You present yourself very well. You even in groups, you maintain eye contact with individuals, and that's an amazing. I don't know if it's a skill or a talent or what it is, but to be able to connect with people like that, even in a large group setting, that's powerful. And so it's interesting. I'm interested to find out, how did Bradford go ding? Right?
I'd be happy to share with you, man. That I'll share anything that I've got that I can give to you with you at any time.
Yes, sir.
All right, David, man. We're going to shift gears again. Okay, so as we know, right, the children are our future. One of my favorite songs ever.
Well, she killed on that vocal, didn't she?
Ooh, man. I believe the children. Don't make me go there, bro. We go to church here today.
Yes,
so,
sir.
With that being the case, right, children are our future, man, and so many, the increase in suicides in this country, particularly since 2020 and the pandemic, or the pandemic, if you will, so many kids have lost the value of life, man, and they don't see themselves as being worthy or valuable, and their lives are so dim, man. What do you see as missing that our kids really need? And in addition to that, how do you see yourself making an impact on our youth in a way that really matters and it's going to lift them up to live the life that they were meant to live?
Well, I tell you what, brother, the neurons are firing. I can't pick a direction on this. So let me start with this. The first thing that, as we go back, tying back to the earlier part of our conversation, when we look at those self-evident truths that our founders recognized, basically the conversation they were having, if I just boil it down to a sentence, it was, on what is a society based? Mm-hmm. And they came to universal agreement that unless you have a moral society, you've got a society that's doomed to fail. Even with regard to liberty, they said if you've got liberty without morality, you're destined for tyranny. The only true freedom is to be a moral people. And John Adams has the famous quote that says, our Constitution was only made for a religious and moral people. It's wholly inadequate to govern any other. That's what the whole American experiment was about, was to have people self-govern with limited government. It was revolutionary, because we decided to have a nation that was founded on a rule of law, not the rule of a king or people.
King, absolutely, right. Yeah.
So what they came to with that is all laws are based on morality, and all morality is rooted in religion. And if you truly unpack that statement, if you truly unpack what that means, even someone who claims not to be religious there's a religion for that. That's called humanism, right? It comes back to what you choose as your worldview. You either live a God-centered worldview, or you live a self-centered worldview. So if you're going through life and there is no God, success in that life looks vastly different than someone who believes that God rules and reigns and he created each one of us. So that's one of the first pieces there. Self-evident truth. Our children are being attacked at so many levels. Their very identities under attack. We've got people who live in confusion. You can confound a certain segment of our society simply by asking the question, what is a woman? Because they're telling us that, if a man decides that he feels like a woman at any given moment, he can, gain access to the women's restroom because he identifies as a woman. That is confusion, brother. I mean, we have things that we call mental illness that I don't know if it's mental illness. I think that one of the greatest things the devil did in this world was to convince people that he doesn't exist. And I've often said, evil is progressive. And so if I could change things on a broad scale, just with one fell swoop, the first thing I would do is to go back to the founding fathers' ideal that the Bible is a necessary tool for education. There's a reason the founding father, Benjamin Rush, was chosen as the architect of our initial education system. You can read his writings. He was a huge advocate for the Bible being used in schools. When villages or communities would be set up, or small towns, the local church, it was a church on Sunday, but during the week it was where they had school. It's where public meetings were held. So even Thomas Jefferson, who many people say was the least religious of the founders, he viewed it as his duty as president of the United States to go to church on Sunday. So to deny our roots, and see, people get confused on that because they think that means that we're a theocracy. No, we're not. It means that we've accepted the moral teachings of Jesus Christ as our foundation for our laws and our culture. It doesn't mean that the government or any person has the right to determine what you or I believe, or how we choose to worship God, or whether we choose to worship God. That's part of what comes in the liberty package. And that's why I tell people all the time, the greatest freedom you can have is to have a Christian at the helm, because the Christian understands to respect your right to choice, even in whether you worship God or not. We're going to stand for your ultimate freedom. So going back to your question, I know it seems like I'm on a rabbit trail here, but protecting children means, again, pursuing truth, teaching them who they are. Are we going to continue to allow our education system to tell children, breaking them up into, I forget what they're called, but I remember there's a woman who testified. Yeah, they break them up into groups and identify them by skin color, and they tell one group you're oppressors and one group you're victims, and all. It's lies. It's lies upon lies and lies upon lies. And I'll wrap it up with this. The father of Rachel Scott, I think his name is Dennis Scott. I remember it's a profound moment for me. She was the one one of the ones the children killed at Columbine High School back in that shooting in the 90s. Yeah. And he was a educational historian to some extent, where he talked about how when America rose to greatness, it's because our schools were primarily interested in teaching children moral character. They were using the Bible, the golden
rules, rules, right? Yeah, treat your neighbor the way you want to be treated, and you make a mess, clean it up.
I remember that was in the front of the school bus when I was on the football team. When we'd ride to some team across town, I remember that being up on the school bus, and the golden rule: do unto others as you have them do unto you. Right. And he pointed out that when we made the shift to where the focus of schools was academic achievement rather than moral character, moral teaching, we've been on a gradual decline in all areas. We've had more school shootings. Our academics have fallen. Our performance in science and arts and mathematics and history, we're all down at the bottom of the pack, or at least at the middle of the pack. So. Anyway, that's what I see. We've got to protect our children. We've got to stop allowing them to be lied to and deceived. We've got the government calling parents who confront evil school boards, calling them the terrorists, calling those parents the terrorists who are showing up for their kids. Yeah, it's backwards, my friend, and that's we got to change that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And one of the points of contention I want to make is that you can be a moral individual and not subscribe to Christianity, right? I mean, that's possible. Yeah. Right. There are a lot of people who aren't Christian. I just want to make that for everyone out there who's not Christian. There's a lot of religions that have really great morals that they follow. I mean, and And then morals also can be subjective. I mean, some of these things are it's pretty obvious to me, right? And to you, like we don't, a grown man shouldn't be having sex with a 5-year-old girl, right? I mean, that's just wrong, like on every level. But there are some religions that maybe in ancient times, I think I've read some other ancient accounts where that was normal. There's some societies right now where a girl could be 11 years old and marry a 30-year-old man, right? Mm-hmm. Is that immoral or is it not? I mean, it's just a matter of whatever their culture deems to be immoral. But what I can agree with you on is absolutely there are some morals, and I'm not a big person on morals per se, but there are within religion some very strong morals that I think are missing for sure. Like some of the basic things we just talked about, treating your neighbor with respect, right? Loving and honoring your mother and father, right? I mean, just the 10 Commandments. I mean, you could take the 10 Commandments out of the Bible. If we did those, we'd be in a much better situation. They still have a lot of value, in how we live our lives.
Yeah, here's the thing with that. I mean, Jesus said, I did not come to abolish the law. I came to fulfill the law, right? He actually, in the Sermon on the Mount, he went through the true meaning of what the 10 Commandments are, where, the 10 Commandments say, thou shalt not murder. But Jesus says, if you look at your brother and call him a fool, you've committed murder in your heart. What he's exposing is the standard. But what I'd say to you with regard, because I think this is an important point, Bradford, I agree with you in the statement that a person who isn't a Christian, or let's say even a person who is not a believer in any God, right? Let's say a true humanist, someone that believes in Darwinian theory of evolution, that we all evolved by accident, right?
Right.
But what you run against, the brick wall you run against in that line of thinking is at some point, I guess it comes to if you believe, as I do, that there is objective morality. In other words, morality is not a man-made concept. Now, if you believe it's a man-made concept, the brick wall you run, or the dead end, I should say, that you run into then you can't make any moral argument for anything, because really it's just your opinion. So if morality is not just opinion or a shared opinion, let's say, if morality is something that exists outside of man, then you can conclude reasonably and rationally that God must exist. Now, that doesn't necessarily identify him. That's just saying that if there's an objective morality, then it's probably a mind of some sort that put it there. And I love the way C.S. Lewis made that argument in his book, Mere Christianity. He says, if you've got two notes on a piano and you're trying to decide which note ought to be played to make a proper chord, right? You don't have another note that's telling you what note to be played. The thing that's telling you what note ought to be played must be something outside the piano. Because at the end of the day, what is this thing that tells us that we can't do those unspeakable abominations, right? In every society that's ever existed in man, it's been against that society's law to murder, to steal, or to take another man's wife. Now, they might have differed on how many wives a man could have.
Right, for sure. No doubt.
But you couldn't take someone else's.
Right. So, keep your own. You got your own 10, keep your own 10, man. Leave that guys alone.
Listen, I don't know how they would do that, because I've got my hands full with one, brother. I don't know about you.
Man, tell me about it, man. Hey, I'm with you, brother. All right, David, man, as you know, we can go on and on, talk about that. During the break, we were talking about having a part 2 about just that, right? I mean, that's a big discussion, right, for many people. But I think we can agree that there's something certainly missing from our youth. And, it is certainly around some of the moral standards and just having a guidance, a template to follow, of where to go. And as you said, picking the right key to make the chord. So I like that analogy there. Well, man, look, as we wrap up our time together today, man, and it's been absolutely amazing. I wanted to ask you, so when it's all said and done, and you said a lot throughout the course of the interview, right? I mean, and you may have answered this already in some degree, but I want to give you an opportunity to really encapsulate it all into one thought. When it's all said and done and all the smoke clears for you in this life, what ultimate mark do you want to leave on the world where people say, man, that guy David was ...
Yeah, and that's a question that, it happens every day. What am I doing? Am I really doing any good here? And I know I used to have a pastor that would stand before us and say, anything good you see in me, ain't nothing good in me but Jesus. you know?
Okay.
And I think that would be for me, if people could look at me and say that in some way, you know, because I'm not the guy that I've necessarily led a lot of people through the sinner's prayer where they come to a decision point in Christ and things like that.
Right.
And
right.
I don't, you know, that's the thing. It's Jesus talks about parts of the body and how we all make up the body. And the body has different parts that do different functions within that body.
Right.
And so I think people like you and I, we tend to be a little more on the front lines, right? I think it's important to sow seeds of truth. And I do believe with the, or agree, I'm sorry, with the idea that where you sow truth, you're planting seeds that you know go to, or not, I guess not seeds, but you're creating a pathway that can lead to that, you know, saving knowledge of God and come to knowledge of Christ. And it's humbling. You know, to put a fine point on that answer with regard to kids, I think, you know, when we teach children, you were created with a purpose by a loving God who wants a relationship with you. He knows not only the numbers of the hair on your head, but he knows like each hair by number, right? He knows you so well. He knitted you together in your mother's womb. I think to teach children that idea about how special they are, that permeates everything, doesn't it? It permeates where you were born. It permeates your skin color. It permeates how you grew up, what family you were born into, what kind of father you had, what kind of mother you had. It helps you decide the person you want to be. Do you want to be a person that lives in vengeance, seeking to live your life based on the injustices visited upon you? Or do you want to look at your life and realize we all have our struggles, no matter how much someone may look like they have it together, they're going through something. Every one of us is. And we can be a person that people look to go, hey, brother, I need you. I need you to be here for me.
Yeah.
And I just choose to be that. Jordan Peterson had a great thought. Be the person at your father's or mother's funeral that your family comes to lean on to help them get through it.
I like that.
Man.
I like that.
And I think if we can create people that care about character and integrity and understanding that there's eternal significance to this life, everything matters, right, brother? Everything matters,
brother. Everything matters, man. What a way to wrap up the show, man. David, this has been an amazing experience, man. You know, having this conversation with you and actually being able to get it recorded. We've had many of these conversations in the past, but no documentation of it except for in our minds and memories, right? So now we have something that we can actually put into the annals of history, this conversation. And it could be a continued conversation. So, man, I want to invite you to come back maybe at a later time and we can continue this talk. And I really appreciate you being on the show. If someone wants to follow you, David, on social media, you know, they're interested in maybe being a part of the Constitutional Party of Texas or really keeping up to what you're up to, how can they find you on social media?
You know, that's a very good question because I've got some issues with some of the platforms out there, as you may well know. There's one with the initials LI that I'm in a personal vendetta against right now because of their suppression of free speech, and Facebook is doing it too.
Well, hey, man, you know, we'll make sure we have a description that all that information down in the description if people want to get involved in any way or just want to follow and see what you're up to, man, and keep track of that. And maybe even come see the band play one night.
Yes, sir.
Dude, it's been an amazing pleasure, man. Distinct pleasure to have you on the show. And like I said, you're always welcome to come back, man. And, you know, any final thoughts you want to share with the audience before we bring this to a close?
I think that we have, as typical, we have touched on so many important things. I think the main thing is to encourage people to look at what responsibilities they've been given in life. You know, if you're a husband, be a husband. If you're a father, be a father. Whatever platform you've been given, you know, I would say that's a gift of God, that He's put you there to do what is good, and it comes down to my favorite Bible verse, right? Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you, but that you do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God? And I think if we all lived that way, and I know you and I don't fully agree yet, I'm working on you.
It's all good.
But that's the point. Life is bigger than us, and to remember that, and to share that blessing with each other is just a wonderful calling.
Awesome, man. Awesome, David. Well, brother, I love you, man, and I appreciate you being on here once again. And we'll see you next time, man. Take care. Tell the family I said hello. All righty.
Absolutely will. Thank you, my friend.
All right, buddy. Bye-bye. So David got back with us with all his social media information, and here it is. I want to let him share it with you. Thanks, everyone.
Basically, you can find me everywhere as Texas Wise Guy 1, and that's the number 1. The one exception is on Twitter. You can find me as the Texas Wise Guy. So either Texas Wise Guy number 1, and then or the Texas Wise Guy on Twitter. And finally, for Constitution Party Texas, that's our website. It's constitutionpartytexas.org. So again, that's constitutionpartytexas.org. And I want to encourage you and all your viewers and listeners to look at the 7 principles of our party and look at what makes us different in terms of principles as well as structure, and how we have the potential to utterly change the landscape for the better regarding politics in Texas and the United States of America. Again, thank you so much for having me, my friend, and I look forward, I hope, to doing it again very soon.
This is Doris Brown's baby boy. We out.